Welcome to the Clear Brand Academy podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. I'm your host, Alexander Toth. If you've been watching the news recently or paying any attention at all, you know that there's a lot of talk about a recession coming up. Now, recessions make everyone feel nervous. Your personal finances might be at risk. Your business finances might be at risk. I think for business owners, there's a lot more at stake as well. Are you going to have to fire employees during a recession? It's a big fear that people have. Are you going to be able to survive the recession at all? How are you going to sell things? And today, I want to walk through that because it's possible to prepare your business for a recession in advance and then take specific actions once it hits to make it through. So today we're going to go through 7 ways to prepare your business for this upcoming recession, plus 4 things to do once the recession hits. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is I was curious to see what's online. What is the internet saying about how to prepare a business for a recession? So I Googled it, and I'm fascinated. I don't know where people are getting their advice. So some of the things that I saw that I just want to get out of the way at the front here because they're not going to work. One, a lot of folks are talking about diversifying revenue. Now, I think that this is a great idea for a business as a whole. We've taken on clients, one client in the past who 40% of their revenue came from one customer of theirs. That is not a safe place to be at any point, whether it's a recession or not. So diversifying revenue, or at least diversifying clientele so that you're not getting all of your revenue from one place, is a good idea regardless of whether we're approaching a recession or not. Now, the reason why I don't think this will work right now is because there's a good chance it's too late. The recession, we're heading in, right? The stocks so far this year have gone down 15%. Now, growth, GDP has still gone up. Spending is still going up. And so that's where we're kind of unsure about things. But with stocks going down, I'm not sure there's enough time to diversify revenue. Do I think that you shouldn't try? No. I just don't think that that's necessarily the best advice right now. A couple other things that I saw, next one's probably not written by a business owner. This may have been written by a typical blog writer who's just kind of Googling things and then rephrasing into their own blog. But save money and pay off debt simultaneously. I love the idea. Not sure how somebody's going to do that while they're preparing for a recession. That seems like an either or to me. If you're making so much money that you're able to stockpile cash and also pay off debt, a recession is not concerning to you, right? So we'll get into what I think you should do as far as these 2 things. I do like the ideas, again, but I'm seeing advice out there, hey, you got to do both of these things. I don't know that that's practical. Some other things as far as preparing your business for a recession. One piece of advice that I saw online was sell like crazy. No duh. If you're not doing that all the time, what are you doing? That's just called business. So selling like crazy, I don't think is a way to prepare for a recession. Get ahead of your competition. Also, that is just business. I'm not sure how that goes into getting prepared for a recession. So, with very real risks here, and we want to be able to approach our preparation with a level head. So let's get into what we're doing at ClearBrand, and this is based on research. So a lot of this research comes from Jim Collins in his book, Great by Choice. So Jim Collins is the single best business writer in existence, possibly ever. He's done incredible research on great companies. Now, you may have heard of the book Good to Great. In this, he studied companies that were on a downward trajectory and then turned it around and beat the stock market by something like 10x. That was the book Good to Great. Now, the book Great by Choice, him and his research assistants studied companies that survived chaos. So this is things like an airline company making it through and succeeding during after 9/11. Right? The airline industry is in chaos. And so what did the airlines who did best do? Right? So this is all about surviving chaos. So this absolutely applies to a recession. So some of these things come straight from that, but there's other things Jim Collins doesn't really get into things like budget very much. And so my team's done some research on what do we do to prepare. So that's where this comes. So this is all very research based. We use these exact tips to grow throughout the entire pandemic. Year over year, we grew 40% and I believe 50% were the 2 years that were in the pandemic. So this works. Let's go through the 7 things that you can do to prepare for a recession. And then after that, I'm going to get into the 4 things you can do once it starts, if it's not already started for you in your company right now. Now, the 7 things to do, I'm going to break into 6 of them are going to go into 3 categories. So there's 2 items per category. So the first category is your product and services. What are we going to do about your products and services to prepare for a recession? So number 1, we want to understand what's working right now. We want this understanding so that when things get hard, we have a clear picture of where we've been and where we are. When things get hard, people start, their brains stop working. So we're going to prepare for that. We want to prepare for your brain to be second guessing you in the middle of a recession. When you see your numbers declining, we want to set your brain up to be able to live within reality. So the first thing we're going to do here is understand what's working right now. We want to know what is currently selling and why. What about the marketing for that? What are we doing in marketing? What are we doing in sales? What are we working on upgrades to these products or services? Have we tested the messaging, right? We're really going in depth. What is working right now with products, services, sales that's driving our current revenue? So very, very clear picture of that. So this could be spreadsheets of your various revenue streams. We also want reports from marketing, reports from sales, things like that. So we really have a clear picture. This is what's working right now. So that when things get hard, we know what has been working. And I'll get to once the recession hits, how you're going to use this data here in a minute. Now, the second item under products and services that you can do to prepare for a recession is we want to make sure that we are innovating appropriately. This is from Jim Collins here. Within the world of innovation, right, every company does need to be innovating. But there's something interesting about innovation. There's a minimum line of innovation that you have to be engaging in. But once you've crossed that line of innovation, there is an extremely diminishing return of increasing innovation over that line. So we want to make sure right now, before the recession starts, we want to be looking at your levels of innovation. Are you working on new products or services? Are you improving your current products and services? If not, we want to start. We're not going to go overboard with this. If you have not been innovating, but you have been selling and your business is successful, we don't want to start changing everything. We just want to think about and get to this minimum level of innovation. That's all we got to do. So if you haven't been innovating, that tells me that the minimum level of innovation for your industry might not be that much. Now, the risk factor here is that if you haven't been innovating, you might be on the verge of being out-innovated, and that would be a problem. So we want to look at your level of innovation. How often are you developing new products and services, improving your current products and services? I'm not saying you have to bump it up. We just want to make sure that we're hitting that minimum level. So if you're already improving things, you might be there. So then what we want to do is basically record how you're innovating. Is it a certain budget, a certain percentage of your revenue that's being devoted to developing these products and services? Great. Write that down. If you're not innovating at all, we want to maybe consider. If I've had 0% of my budget going to innovation and developing new products and services, improving what I've got, maybe I'm just going to go to a 1% or a 2% of our budget that will be going to innovation. So we want to have some level there. We do not want to go too much, but we also don't want to go too little. We don't want to go too much because in general, those who innovate most go out of business. And we're going to be really careful with this, and I'll come back to this when we're talking about what to do once the recession hits, because this is important. But this is why we're going for this kind of Goldilocks, not too much, not too little amount of innovation. Too little, eventually you're going to go out of business. And too much, you're also increasing chances that you'll go out of business. So we want to hit this Goldilocks level of innovation. And then, like I said, our brains are going to turn off once things get hard. So we want to write this down. We want to record this. How much are we innovating? Is it good or bad? Do we want to increase it, lower it, and have all of that written so that once the recession hits, we're going to come back to this. All right, the second big category for how to prepare for a recession is your cash reserves. So the first item within the cash reserves category is we want to stockpile cash. The companies that make it through chaotic times and recessions generally have more cash reserves than their competition. Now, I can't tell you exactly what that dollar amount is. For Microsoft, at one point when they were getting started, they wanted to have a year of expenses in their bank account, in their cash reserves. That is way more than most companies can ever achieve. But now you understand a little bit about how Microsoft survived. So I hear frequently 3 to 6 months, because the companies that make it through chaos and recessions have more than their competition. That tells me we should really be shooting for 6 months or more. However, because we're close to this upcoming recession. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen soon. Nobody has a crystal ball. Maybe it won't happen, but we're preparing here, right? So we want to stockpile cash as we can. Now, going back to what I had kind of criticized at the beginning of this, folks saying save money and pay off debt simultaneously. No. It's too close right now. We just want to save money. Debt is not necessarily bad. Debt is not necessarily a red flag that you're not doing well. The red flag with debt is if your debt to income ratio goes up. So if your revenue's increasing and your debt's increasing, that's not necessarily bad. If your debt's increasing and your revenue's not increasing, that is bad. But having debt is not itself a red flag. So as we are approaching this recession, I would suggest, now I'm also not a financial advisor, right? So you get to do what you want with this. You make your own business decisions, but I am not currently interested in paying down debt. I am interested in stockpiling cash. Because again, the red flag is debt increasing when revenue is not increasing. That's the huge red flag. So as long as I'm not going further into debt, I can save money and continue making, minimum payments or whatever payments I'm already making on debt, and I haven't entered that red flag territory. The second thing that I would do regarding cash reserves is get access to capital or line of credit if I don't have that 6 months or more in our cash reserves. Basic rule of thumb with finances. If you need to ask for money, you are in a bad situation. So what we want to do is ask for money before we need it. So get access to a line of credit or increase your line of credit when things are good. Now, what I like about a line of credit as a backup scenario is if I went and got a loan to build our cash reserves, I'm paying interest on all of that money, whether I use it or not. If I have some cash reserves but I'm not sure that it's going to be enough for the upcoming recession, then what I like about a line of credit is that I can access it if I need it. But if I don't need it, I'm not paying interest on it. So again, you should go talk to your own financial advisor. I'm just saying what I would do and what some of the things that we're doing at ClearBrand to prepare just in case. So if you have a line of credit, you can increase the limit when things are good. That's the time to go increase the limit on your line of credit. When things are great, when revenue is booming, that's when you go to the bank and say, hey, can I increase this? They're going to be confused. Why are you increasing this? You seem to be doing great. Like, I know, but let's just do it. If you don't need it, great. You didn't pay any interest. If you do need it, you have access now to that capital, just in case. Awesome. That's the second of the two within cash reserves. Let's move on to the third category of things that I would do to prepare for business for a recession. This third category is cash flow. So this is really budgeting. Now, I saw all sorts of advice on cash flow, streamlining expenses, and things like that. Again, streamlining expenses is just business. Do you have extra overhead? If so, why? That is a good question to be asking at any point, whether we're approaching a recession or not. So that's not what we're talking about here. That's just good business. As far as preparing your business for a recession, there's two things we want to do with your cash flow. One is we want to make sure that you have a marketing budget. This is kind of like innovation. You should be spending something on marketing. It depends on how aggressively you're trying to grow. Often, the recommendation is 10% of your revenue. If you are trying to grow, you're going to need to spend more than 10% of your revenue on marketing. 20%, maybe even more. But right now, I'm not suggesting a specific percentage. What I'm saying is you need a marketing budget. And we need to know what that is so that we're ready when we get to the recession. If you can increase your marketing budget, this might be a time to consider it depending on what it's at. If it's not 10%, I'd consider getting it up to 10%. If you're trying to grow aggressively, you're going to need to spend more than 10%. So there's kind of some basic percentages for you, but really the step right here is to set a marketing budget. We're going to write it down just like we did earlier, because when we get to the recession, our brains are all going to turn off. We're all going to be stressed. If revenue is going down, right, the owner feels like their hair's on fire. So we're going to set a marketing budget. We're going to write it down so that we have that. The second thing to do with your cash flow is to set an R&D budget, right? So this is the innovation that we talked about. So the difference from what I suggested earlier I said, make sure that you are innovating enough. Now with your cash flow, what I'm suggesting is that you set your innovation budget. So slightly different, very similar, but a little bit different here. So we want to have your innovation budget. We want to know what that is. So there's the 6 things within those 3 categories. So again, we had products and services, we had cash reserves, cash flow. Now I said that there were 7 things to do to prepare your business for a recession. The 7th thing is we want to consider what could go wrong, then prepare for it. Now this is tough for a lot of business owners. I hold the belief that most business owners are at least somewhat delusional, including myself. So I don't mean this as a criticism, but I don't think a person who has a low risk tolerance and zero delusions would go start a business. I think that starting a business includes at least some level of risk tolerance and some level of optimism / delusion. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So it is hard for a lot of business owners to consider worst case scenarios, to think about what could go wrong, because they're living in this space of, oh, I'm going to make money if things go right. Okay, so right now, if we're going to prepare for a recession, we have to do the hard thing of thinking about what could go wrong. We're going to write these things down. If you are a delusionally optimistic CEO like I am, you have to involve your team in this. Find the people, the biggest pessimists on your team, the people who believe the sky is falling. We want them. We're going to go ask them, what could go wrong? Hey, if we enter a recession, what could go wrong? Let them write everything down. Don't poke them on this. Don't tell them that they're wrong. We want their list of worst case scenarios. Once we have that list, then you, the delusionally optimistic business owner, can now problem solve. Look at this list and figure out how you would solve every single item on the list. How do you prepare for it? What do you do once it happens, if it happens? And we're going to make sure that you have a plan for these worst case scenarios written down. Again, once this happens, if revenue is going down, our brains are going to turn off, and we want to prepare for that. So those are the 7 things to do to prepare for the upcoming recession. Now, once the recession hits, what changes? There are 4 things to do once the recession hits. The first thing, we're going to go back to what you wrote down about what's working, and we're not going to change it. The biggest temptation when we're in a recession, when we see revenue going down, is to change everything. That is a great way to go out of business. And this is from what Jim Collins' research revealed. Those who innovated more went out of business or lost more revenue. Let me say that again because this is huge and it's hard to believe. Those who innovated more went out of business or lost more revenue. So the first thing that we're going to do once the recession hits, if business gets a little bumpy, is we are going to look at our list of what was working and we are not going to change that. The second thing we are going to do is we are going to double down on the things that we know work. Again, this goes against all of the things that you're going to be feeling and thinking. Your brain is going to be screaming at you, it's not working, we have to change everything. And you have to ignore that part of your brain. We are going to keep doing what works, and we're going to double down on the things that work. The third thing that we're going to do is we are going to not innovate more than we were before. Let me repeat what I said again. Those who innovated more during times of chaos and recession, they're the ones that went out of business and lost more revenue. So the third thing that we're going to do once a recession hits is we are not going to innovate more. We are going to continue innovating at the same rate, maybe a little tiny bit more. We might increase the innovation budget a little bit, but we are not going to change everything. We're not going to go throw everything out that we've been doing. We're going to innovate at about the same rate, maybe a tiny bit more than we had been. And we are going to test the things that we are innovating before launching them. So we're going to be innovating at the same pace, and we're going to be testing things in small ways to see what works. Then once we've proven that it works, we can then put a bunch of money into selling that new thing. But we're doing this. Think about testing in small ways. All right. Now, because we do marketing, I'll bring in a website example here. Typically with a website, we're not going to throw everything out when we're revamping a website. What we want to do is keep doing the things that worked, and then we're going to be A/B testing elements of the website as we move forward. Now, this tells us what is working and what's not. We A/B test a button color, for example. We learn which one works better. Great. Now we're going to take the winner and we're going to A/B test that against another button color. right? But we're not going to say, oh, this website isn't working at all. Throw the whole thing out, change the whole business, change all of our products and services. That's how you go out of business. So we're going to innovate at about the same rate that we had been. We're going to test our innovative ideas in small ways. And then if it works, then we can increase the budget there. But if it doesn't work, we're going to stop. Okay, that was the third thing once the recession starts. The fourth thing to do once the recession starts is you do not change your marketing budget. So we're going to keep that the same. This is another thing folks talk about, streamlining expenses in a recession. If you haven't been streamlining expenses, that's a problem to deal with separately from a recession. But we're not going to decrease marketing budget or our sales budget. Donald Miller, the guy who created StoryBrand, he's got The Business Made Simple. He has a great picture of a business. He likens it to an airplane. And different parts of your business are different parts of the airplane. Your sales is the left engine and your marketing is the right engine. If the plane is losing altitude, you do not turn off the engines. You keep the engines running. So we don't need to decrease our marketing budget. I'm not sure how much, if at all, you would need to increase your marketing budget. But we definitely do not want to get rid of it. That's like turning off the engine in an airplane when you're going down. It's bad timing. I don't think you should ever get rid of your marketing budget in general or your sales budget. But of all times to do that, when the plane is losing altitude is the worst. That's when we keep the engines on for sure. Maybe even increase the budget a little bit. But again, you're going to be in the middle of a recession. Your brain's not going to be working correctly. And you're going to be juggling all of these expenses. You have to make sure that you're still innovating. You're losing money at the same time. So you might not be able to increase your marketing budget, but we are going to at least maintain it. Now, how do we do that if our revenue is going down? Well, this is not necessarily one of my four things, but a couple more kind of budgetary items that I would add to this are that, one, I also would not fire all my employees just to make sure that we can hit the budget. This is where the cash reserves come in. Delta forced a bunch of pilots into early retirement at the beginning of the pandemic, and now they're 2 years later and they don't have enough pilots. Duh. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sure that there were a lot of smart people in the room when they made that decision, and they were just thinking about how do we survive this. But now they're dealing with the problem of getting rid of employees. They can't hire fast enough to get the planes back in the air. So what's another option? One of the companies that Jim Collins studies in Great by Choice, they reduced everyone's pay, including the CEO. And the lower the employee was on the hierarchy, the less their pay was reduced because they're making less money anyway. So the CEO's pay was reduced by the greatest percentage. And then as we go down the hierarchy, the percentages shift a little bit, but the people making the least money decrease pay by the least amount. People making most money decrease pay by the most amount. That would be a strategy that I would personally consider before getting rid of employees. Because if you get rid of your employees and you do figure out how to sell, then you cannot deliver on your sales. So going back to our budget here, we're going to keep our innovation budget the same. We're going to keep our marketing budget the same. Something else has to give. And I don't think that the solution is firing people willy-nilly. This also was not how business was done until very recently. And now this is a big way to do it. If you're changing your business structure, that might be a time to consider that. If you are acquiring another company and you're getting rid of some of their employees, that might be a time to consider it. But a recession, in my mind, I want to have a fantastic team who knows that I'm committed to them, so that if and when we do increase the sales, we have a team that can deliver, who have the training, who can deliver the products, deliver the services, and I am able to tell the sales and marketing team, let's keep going, right? If I get rid of the team that delivers the products and services, marketing and sales are not going to be able to sell as much. So I know that this is a tough conversation here as far as budget goes, but I would say that, yes, we have to maintain innovation and marketing budgets, but we also, there are limits to the things that we can get rid of within the budget. So I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Quick recap though. That's what we're doing at ClearBrand. That's what I recommend. That's what the research suggests we should do. So quick recap, 7 things to do to prepare your business for the upcoming recession. The first is understand what's working right now and write it down. The second, make sure that you are innovating enough, but not too much. The third, we're going to stockpile cash, increase our cash reserves. The fourth, we're going to get access to financing or credit that is available if we need it, but not necessarily something that we are paying interest on if we don't need it. Now, if you have no cash reserves, that might be a little bit different story. You might know that you're going to need a loan or something, but if you have some cash reserves, that's where what I would personally do is something along the lines of a line of credit. Cash. The fifth thing is to set a marketing budget. If you have not set one already, something between 10 and 20%, I think is a good starting point. The sixth thing is to set an innovation or an R&D budget. That R&D is research and development. So we're going to set that budget. And then the seventh thing is we're going to consider what could go wrong and make a plan for it. The fourth thing is we're going to do once the recession hits is we're not going to change what's working. Second thing, we're going to double down on what's working. The third thing, we are going to innovate about as much as we were before, maybe a little bit more, but we're not just launching things willy-nilly. We are testing in small ways to make sure that they work before we bet the farm on these innovations. So we're really maintaining the things that we know work. We're adding in these innovations in small ways until we know that they're good. The last thing once the recession hits is we're going to leave our marketing budget and our sales budget and our innovation budget alone. We are going to maintain what we were doing before the recession. I know that that's tough on the budget, that you have to get creative there, but I would keep marketing, innovation, and sales about the same as they were before the recession. So if you have ideas on how to prepare for a recession, go ahead and leave a comment below. I'm super curious what has worked for companies in the past. I'm very data-driven. This is what I've seen the data revealing that's actually practical, actually helpful. But if you've done something else, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear it. If you have not yet subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications. Without the notifications, the algorithm basically of YouTube or Apple, wherever you're listening to this, the algorithm basically ignores it. So if you can turn on notifications, that's great. You'll actually find out when we're releasing our next podcast. Leave a review. That helps us. That helps our other folks who could use advice like this. All right, that's it for today. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the ClearBrand Academy podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. If you liked this podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to outsource your marketing to our team, go to clearbrand.com.